morning, folks. It's been a minute. Gridiron 360, back on the mics.
All right.
What's up, Dave?
What's going on, buddy?
Bill here. Present.
President.
Present. So we're going to talk a little bit about college football. We're going to review the games of Week 14, Rivalry Week. Then we're going to talk a little bit about a preview for the upcoming conference championship games. Sound fun?
Let's do it.
All right. So we're going to start with my boys as the Clemson Tigers traveled cross-state to take on our in-state rivals for the Battle of the Palmetto State. As we go to Columbia and take on the South Carolina Gamecocks. Rolling in there at number 3 in the CFP, 11-0. Gamecocks 4-7. Did beat number 4 Georgia.
I have a really big question about this game.
Yes.
What's up with the photo of your linebacker making out with the South Carolina cheerleader? That's somebody who likes...
I didn't see it.
Oh, you muse. His girlfriend is a South Carolina cheerleader.
Oh, Tanner? Tanner, that, yeah.
I have to admit, she's not rough to look at.
No.
She's a bad decision maker, but she's not rough to look at. And I think his brother plays there, I think I heard.
I think so, yeah. I think he's from South Carolina, but yeah, Tanner. I tell you, that kid, he's a beast, and he hits like a freight train.
He's old school, man.
But I tell you, over his years at Clemson, he has a shot to make it in the NFL.
Well, is he playing a traditional linebacking role for them?
No, he's not.
Is he a safety? Okay.
He's a safety.
Because he's a big safety.
Yeah, he's a safety.
He might be that, the NFL is kind of merged into that kind of
that hybrid.
star position, hybrid type linebacker.
Yeah, he's a safety, man, and he hits hard. He's our strong safety.
But he can come up and thump you in the running game, too.
Yeah.
So that's why I see him more in the secondary.
I can show you some video from, I don't know if it's last year or the year before, where we were doing Oklahoma drills in practice.
Yep.
And he lays wood. And you're talking about some good players that he's going 1-on-1 or 2-on-2 with.
Yep.
And he can lay wood. I mean, it's crazy. He's gotten
It's hard to tell. He's
so good over his
He's got
career,
pipes
though.
like he's a linebacker. He's got some beef to him.
He's a kid that has, the start of his career, I wouldn't exactly say he would be an NFL prospect, but the way they've developed him and the coaches have coached him up, and the way he's been coachable and he's worked, he might not get drafted, but he can make a team. Anyways, so yeah, this wasn't much of a game. Just as we always do, we were able to take the first team out in the middle of the third quarter. It was 24-3 at the half. Trevor goes 26 of 36, 295, 3 TDs, no picks.
Horrible.
Yeah,
horrible.
I mean, we were just all over the place. 38-3 was the final.
How about Lawrence throwing in 8 carries for 66 yards?
He had the
man.
most yardage on the ground, but they gave it to him. It wasn't anything like it was drawn up. I mean, he saw openings, and that's a dimension of his game we've talked about it at the beginning of the year. That was something that they were trying to incorporate more in his game, and he's gotten better and better at it every week. And we just look good. I mean, we're clicking on all cylinders, and I don't know what's going to happen over there at South Carolina. It seems like the AD is sticking with Muschamp. I hit my friend Chris Marler from Saturdays Down South. He's a big Bama guy. I said, what are the odds that Muschamp is a D coordinator on your staff next year? Because God knows they need the help.
Yep.
And, it may not be done yet, but it still could happen. Again, I think the guy is a really good D coordinator. He's just not a head coach.
He will be heavily pursued at coordinator around the country if he is let go.
Yeah, I mean, if he doesn't get that head coaching offer again, then that's the spot. Go to Bama. Go to Bama, be a D coordinator, and make a name for yourself again, or reinvent yourself. But yeah, I mean, they didn't have anything for us, and look, to South Carolina's credit. The freshman quarterback Helinski played. He was 16 of 27, $105, no TDs, 1 pick. they couldn't do really much on us. I don't even know if they had 200 yards total offense. Running the ball, our former running back, Tavian Feaster, number 4, who transferred over to South Carolina. Now, he is from Spartanburg, and he was a grad student. So, doesn't surprise that he stayed in state. He's done good things for them. And a real nice thing at the end of the game, there was some really nice love between him and our players. When we always sing our alma mater where our fans are sitting, no matter where they are, home or away, he kind of came over, was hugging with the guys, was hugging with ETN. And that's one of the reasons, honestly, that he moved on is because ETN had
you want
taken
playing
the
time.
backfield.
Yeah, you got to get playing time.
But he is a good kid. And, South Carolina was heavily decimated by injuries going into this game.
Yep.
They have been a lot all year, but they were heavily decimated by injuries. And it showed. What I like is, going into this, I really just worry about health, safety of our players in a hostile environment that's known to be a little extracurricular in the hostility.
They got a little West Virginia in them.
There wasn't any of that.
Nope.
And the fact that there was this nice, you mentioned Tanner and his South Carolina cheerleader girlfriend, but Feaster and the team, it was actually one of the nicest at the end of the game, like cordial things going on there between the two of us. So it wasn't too bad. Nobody got seriously injured, which is good because we got it all ahead of us. And now we move into the weekend, take on Virginia in the ACC championship.
Yeah, well, this game could have, I think what the respect factor of this, and I think this is important to talk about as we get into this playoff, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, is this game could have gotten more and more out of hand. Clemson decided to control the clock a little bit, was a little bit more efficient in their offense. There was some explosion. T. Higgins, that guy's going to be drafted high. He only had 3 catches, but went for over 100 yards.
Two
and 2
TDs
scores.
in the first half. He's had like last week. He had 3 TDs in the first half. He's turning it on.
Yep.
And even Ross, he had more yards.
Yep.
On the day, just barely in 1 TD. More catches as well. He was 9 for 111 in a TD. Higgins was 3 for 101 and 2.
Yeah. So this was not unexpected, this kind of result. I think Clemson once again just showed that they've got the ponies. Again, I think an important thing to keep looking at is how Clemson has rotated players. I don't, it's not about, number one, there's a reason why you develop players the way you do, and it's because you get them playing time, number one. But number two is you talked about health. Getting healthy. Clemson is definitely a team to talk about for the playoff. All roads point to them getting in. They have one more stop along the way we'll talk about, but I just think those kind of things matter at this time of year, and Clemson once again was able to do that. So that's a big thing for them. Whether you want to talk about their schedule or not, I could care less. They're winning handily, but their guys are getting action.
Yeah, 38-3, we could have definitely put more on them, but, like I said, middle of the third, the backups came in, got some playing time. We rotate them in with our starters until we rotate them all in and our starters get a blow in the fourth. Yep. The last thing I do want to say, the leading tackler on our defense this game with 7 tackles, 3 assists, and a sack.
The Beast.
Once again, there are 2 game changers that I see on a defensive side of the ball in these top 4. One of them
going to be your Simmons.
One of them is Mr. Chase Young for Ohio State. The other one is this guy, Mr. Isaiah Simmons, number 11. He is everywhere, and he will wreck a game. Yep. If we need him to, he can do it. He is just that kind of guy.
Yep.
So let's move on to our opponents as Virginia Tech and Virginia meet up. This one was for all the marbles in the Coastal Division of the ACC.
Yep.
And a game where Virginia hadn't beaten Virginia Tech in 13, 15 years?
Yeah, it was something
like
long
that.
and ridiculous. Yep.
Yeah, it's been a long time. We talked about it last week. Hats off to Bud Foster. Would have really loved to see him pull this one out and go out on a high note. But, hey, he did anyways. His defense looked really good on the back half, back 2/3 of the year. They end up losing this game to Virginia, 39-30. Virginia Tech ends up 8-4. Virginia ends up 9-3. Tech gets bounced from the rankings. They were sitting right there at the end at like what was it?
24.
Like 24, yep. And Virginia, and we'll talk about the new ranking, slides in at 23.
Yeah, I mean, this game really came down to two stat lines. I mean, the yardage was within 10 yards. Virginia Tech actually had the ball for almost 8 more minutes than Virginia, but it came down to turnovers and it came down to sacks. So it was big game-changing plays. Virginia Tech had 4 turnovers and was sacked 6 times. Well, Virginia only had 1 turnover, a pick from Perkins, and he was only sacked twice. So, again, this was a game that was for the having for Virginia Tech, but they just struggled to make the big play. Got some youth. Hooker threw two interceptions in the game. I'm trying
18 of 30, 311, 1 TD, 2 picks.
Yeah, so
now on the other side of the ball, Bryce Perkins, 20 for 33, 311 yards, 1 TD, 1 pick, but he also added the most rushing. This is crazy. He had the most carries and the most yardage rushing. He had 19 carries for 164 yards and 2 TDs.
I mean, think about it this way. He accounted for all but 17 yards of their offense.
Yeah, I mean, look, man.
That's not going to get it done against a big-time program, but it's impressive.
We'll have to hem him up. But, look, this was actually a fairly competitive game. In the first quarter, it was 13-3 Virginia. And then the Hokies put on another 3, and they go into half 13-6, and they come out of halftime. Hokies put 21 on the board in the third to Virginia's 7. So at this point, it is 27-20.
Yep.
You know, so they had that, going in the fourth quarter, Virginia Tech is winning by a touchdown, and then Virginia just unloads. Virginia Tech puts another field goal on in the fourth, but Virginia put 19 points on and ends up 39-30 Virginia. My hat's off to Bronco Mendenhall.
Yep.
He's up for the ACC Coach of the Year, and rightfully
so. Yep.
Rightfully so. I think that the other name you really need to look at, I think there's a couple. I think Matt Brown has done a good job, but I think Scott Satterfield, what he's done at Louisville, I think that could be be taken into high consideration. Now, he'll probably won't get it because Virginia's in the ACC championship game and Louisville's not.
Yep.
And the only reason I don't mention Dabo is because, well, I mean, he's won it here in the past several years, and it's not like he's done anything different than he's been doing. He's done a great job, but
when you do what you've done previous years, it pulls you out of consideration.
You've set the bar high for yourself. Yeah, so in order to get that consideration, you have to do something maybe even beyond that, which I don't know what else he can do.
Yeah.
But Bronco Mendenhall, great stuff.
And remember, something to think about too is, I mean, the Cavaliers came into the season with probably 3 really good players. At least from the perspective, and that's your quarterback, Bryce Perkins. I'm forgetting one of the defensive players they got.
Bryce Love.
Well, is it Bryce Love or Bryce Hall?
Oh, Bryce Hall.
Bryce Hall. Where I was getting at was with Bryce Hall. I mean, he lost Bryce Hall, probably in around week 4 or 5.
Yeah.
And, I mean, we're talking about a legitimate first-round talent.
First-round corner.
And, to be able to play some stingy defense. Again, they've been in some tougher games. I think he got hurt, actually, right before the Florida State game, and that was a relatively close game. But that's a big thing to overcome. On a team we're not talking about a team that's been recruiting 5-star, 4-star athletes over and over again. When you lose those superstar players that you've developed, that is crippling to teams like this. And I got to give them a lot of credit for being able to hang in there. And look, a lot of people projected them to be the winner coming out of the Coastal and to hold on to that in years past. And an interesting note about this, I don't know if you know this, for the last 7 seasons, every single team in the Coastal has represented the Coastal.
Wild. Not one person has repeated in back-to-back years. It's been a new one.
Not even repeated once in 7 years.
In the 7 years, yeah. It's hey, it's your turn.
Yeah.
Your turn. Hey, you're next.
By the way, Clemson, it's Florida State's turn.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, look, this is going to be a good game for us in terms of here. We'll talk more about the ACC championship game, but just briefly, as I look towards the playoff and the quarterbacks we're going to have to face, especially a guy like Justin Fields.
Sure.
This is good practice for us, playing a guy like Bryce Perkins who moves around and throws the ball.
Yep.
Virginia did slip up mid-season. 3 out of 4 weeks, lost to Notre Dame 35-20. Then the next week they go to Miami and they lose 17-9. Then they come home and beat Duke, and then they go to Louisville the following week and lose 28-21. All those losses on the road. Now this is going to be more of a home game for us than them because it's hour and a half to Charlotte for us rather than Charlottesville, Virginia, which is probably a good 6 hours, 7 hours or something. But obviously they don't play as well on the road. Whether that'll make a big difference or not, we'll see. I hope we handle them, certainly as a Clemson fan. But it should be it's a championship game. They've earned their stripes. If you don't think they're going to be ready to play us, just like everyone this year, I mean they can't get into the playoffs, so this is their national championship.
Oh, yeah, and they like nothing more than to spoil that opportunity, but also likely that could put them potentially in a big New Year's Six bowl game. So it's big. I think what's kind of interesting about this game, and I'm checking it right now, it looks to be good, but this is probably the one title game of the Power Five that is really subject to weather. The only other outdoor game is the game out west. But California, traditionally speaking, does not have weather issues.
Well, it's been raining.
Yep.
And I heard somebody just yesterday say it's just been nonstop. It's supposed to continue. It could even go in and might get a break, but it could be raining during the game because it's Friday night and it's just going to be wet. And I'll tell you, I was out there for the national championship last year in this same stadium, and if they had played that thing 24 hours prior to when they did, it was a mess. Yeah. And I was talking to the guy I was with who was an Alabama guy, and we both agreed, look, the one thing why are we here? Okay? And if we're here, why isn't it in Dome? The one thing you don't want is the title game to somehow be altered because of the weather.
You want to see all the best players to play their best,
playing on the best in the best situation that they can.
I agree.
So,
it is, and you are right. It's a 90% chance of rain both Friday and Saturday, which means it's going to be pretty continuous. So that's interesting. But we've noticed though in the ACC, kind of going back, that there've been a fair amount of sloppy games. So important to talk about.
All right. So we talk again. The ACC championship game. We are going to run right into these as we talk about these teams. It's going to be Saturday night at 7:30. It's in Charlotte. I mean, like I said, good opportunity for us to, follow up what we've done all season and close out the regular season on a high note, to show the world that we're still doing what we're doing, and to really be challenged by that mobile and throwing quarterback, which we may have to see down the line. If we keep moving, we'll have to see Justin Fields if he keeps moving, and he's probably the closest thing to that. Yeah,
and I think you're seeing it in the NFL as an example with Lamar Jackson. You can't simulate in practice very well that athletic mobile quarterback because, again, you think about it, you're not touching guys. You're not really trying to run up on them because you don't want non-contact injuries. I agree with you that this is a very good opportunity for them. Again, this kid's not comparable to Justin Fields at this point as an example in the sense of like true talent, but he does run a game very similar to him, and I think that's huge. So I agree with you. Only thing I don't like is that the Panthers played last week. I was hoping they would not. I know they would schedule a road game after this because they don't want to be playing that field. I'm guessing. I'm trying to check on that right now. But hopefully the field is in good shape out there when these guys go. Again, it is what it is. Both teams have to play.
I feel like the last 2-3 years it's been
like rain and crappy,
cold, crappy, windy in this game. Yep. So it is outside in the elements at night. It's North Carolina, so there is the potential for weather. So we'll see. I mean, it's not. It
looks okay right now, though. So that's good because I want to see a clean field. I think at this time of year, I'm not interested in weather impacting these games. It's not the NFL. It's just a different setup. It's just meant, and I'm a more outdoor guy than indoor guy. But when it comes to championships,
it's just like
it's the reason why the Super Bowl has traditionally not been played up north. But at the same time, they're starting to change some of that. I definitely don't want to see rain. That to me is just a strange advantage. But anyway, so we'll move on, and we're going to talk about going to the Big 12. Let's talk Baylor and Kansas.
All right.
So what did you see?
Not much. Not much from old Leslie. I think Les has done a great job this year, by the way. You're talking about a Kansas team that did they even win a game? Maybe won one game last year. Granted, after this, they lose badly at home to Baylor, but in 3-9, again, Matt Rule at Baylor was 1-11. Then he turned around, went 7-6. Now he's 11-1. So, Baylor marches into this thing. I think they were ranked like 8 or 9 going in.
9. 9. Mm-hmm.
10-1, and absolutely dismantle Kansas. It was 21-0 in the first quarter.
They ran wild in this game.
Yeah,
this was a running game.
At halftime, it was 34-0. Final score 61-6. Baylor moves to 11-1. Charlie Brewer didn't really do much.
No,
through the air.
Didn't have to through the air.
Right. They had everybody on that team run. Everybody. I mean, if you look at the rushing stats, I'm looking at 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 guys with rushing stats. That doesn't include Brewer, 2 for -11, which were obviously scramble sacks. So let's discount that. 11 guys rushed the ball.
Yep.
That's crazy, man. 11 different guys.
And what is it? 6 of them averaged over 6 yards a carry.
Yep. Just impressive.
And what is that? 7 touchdowns on the ground?
Yep. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yep, 7 touchdowns on the ground. 1 through the air. Brewer was 13-25, 182, 1 TD, 1 pick through the air.
And their longest run, which is kind of interesting to me, was only 30 yards. So it's not like they were snapping them off. It means that they were efficient and their offensive line was pushing people around. Again, we expect this out of Kansas. But again, you got a guy like Matt Rule who's got he's kind of in a Dabo situation. I think Lincoln Riley in Oklahoma is, they obviously have been kind of looked at as the afterthought probably up until recently, and now we got to start talking seriously about it. But they got to keep their team motivated. What are they playing for? What are they doing? I think Baylor's got a little bit of an advantage in the fact that they were so far in the toilet 2 years ago, and what a resurrection this guy Matt Rule has done. It's been pretty amazing.
Yeah. Now, I mean, look, on Kansas' side of the ball, and this is a credit to, I think, the Baylor defense. I do feel like Baylor at the beginning of the year was just squeaking out wins, just getting by, but they won.
Yeah.
They won. But they definitely seem to be kind of on more of an upward trajectory, really kind of starting with that Oklahoma game. I know they lost it, but they were up by 25, right? And since then, they've put it on people, and their defense has played well. Since that second half where Oklahoma came back and won the game, they've been really good on defense. They had 3 picks in this game. The quarterback for Kansas, number 9, Carter Stanley, was 13-26, 95 yards, no TDs, 3 picks. I will say, they were run on a little bit.
Yep.
They're running back at Kansas, number 1, Puka.
That's a name, got to remember.
Pikachu. Pika. Puka Williams Jr. did have 22 carries for 116 yards. Didn't see the end zone. So if there is, and again, in that Oklahoma game, one of the things that killed him was Hurts rushing the football.
Yep.
So they need to tighten that up this week, but a chance at revenge against Oklahoma, and we'll talk about that game. But, credit to the Baylor defense. They held Kansas to 6 points. 61-6 was the final, and they're looking good going into this thing. With all intents and purposes, they do have a shot.
I said this earlier in the year, and I really believe this. I believe that college football is your season is broken down into 3 halves, and if you fail to do any one of these 3 things, it's usually where you see teams fall apart. And that is, the really good teams spend the first third of the season figuring out who they are. Even if you think you know who you are, you figure it out. Clemson would be a perfect example to me. Like, they would come in and you would think, well, we already know who Clemson is, right? They got a great offense. They reloaded defense, and they're going to play a certain way. This is not the same Clemson team. And they spent the first 4 weeks, and I think Baylor's one of those teams, figuring out who they were. Then you spend that middle third of the season learning really how to be the best version of who you are, and then the last third of the season is proving to everybody that you are that team. And I think Baylor's one of those teams that's kind of followed that roadmap, and that's why they're in play. And I think other teams have struggled with that at times, and I'll use as an example Bama. I think Bama couldn't quite figure out who they were for a little while, and then it caused some problems for them, and they tried to prove they were something else, and it worked for them a little bit as they started to run again, but then, we'll talk about that game later. So I think this is a good sign for Baylor. I think I have to admit, I think this conference is a little bit more in the mix than I thought a week or two ago.
Sure. So let's move on to their opponent this weekend, the Bedlam, as Oklahoma. And they were number 7, I think,
yep.
going into this, 10-1. Goes to Stillwater to take on the Oklahoma State Cowboys, who were 8-3. I think they sat at somewhere around 23, 22,
21.
It was a good game. I mean, look, Oklahoma had control of the game the whole game. 10-7 first quarter, 20-13 at halftime. 27-16 after the third, but Oklahoma State kept fighting. Jalen Hurts, efficient day through the air, but nothing's huge. 13-16, 163 yards, 1 TD, no picks. Of course, he did his thing on the ground, 16 carries for 61 yards and a TD. Kennedy Brooks, their running back, number 26 for Oklahoma, had a phenomenal day on the ground. 22 carries for 160 yards and a TD. On the other side, we love Chuba.
Yep.
Number 30, Chuba Hubbard, the running back for Oklahoma State, miraculously didn't hit 200 yards this game.
Yeah, I got to say this, though. One, it's a rivalry game, but also, we're used to the Mike Gundy sling it around, put up big passing numbers. They have not done that this year.
No.
And they got very little support through the air. I mean, he was 22-32 for 207 yards, but only had 1 pick and no TDs. So the focal point is clearly going to be the guy that's just been wrecking people running-wise all year long, even though their record doesn't support it quite as much as it should. And they were able to do that. So, I love this kid. I think he's a tremendous player. For all the guys that are getting love right now, again, I said it. I think this could be, I'm trying to remember, is he just a true sophomore? Or has he actually come out? But
No. I believe he's a true. He's not coming out.
Oh, so he's not coming out. Okay, because I say that would add to the list of a great running back class.
He's got another year.
Okay, so this will be interesting to see what they can build. Gundy can pass. If he can get a quarterback that can learn to do that, this could be a dangerous team going forward. And, Oklahoma controlled the game, did it a little differently. That's kind of the thing that I go back to that path of, being and proving to everybody who you are. Jalen Hurts for the last couple of games prior to this has had to really carry the team offensively. And, it didn't work out early on in this last third of the season as they lost. But I don't know. I don't know if that's kind of the game plan. Are you saving them maybe for Baylor? I don't really know. It wasn't that big of a blowout. So Oklahoma leaves some question marks for me.
Yeah, I mean, look, now understand that the guy that's been starting for Okie State at quarterback all year, Spencer Sanders, was not playing in this game. It was Drew Brown, his backup.
But Sanders has been more of a ground guy.
Yeah,
than
regardless. It has been more of the ground attack for them. And, look, after the playoff rankings, I think you're talking about the Big 12, having a better situation for this playoff opportunity than we thought last week. They did them a favor, I think, last night, the playoff committee, because with the loss, they only dropped, 3-4 spots. They're at, 24, 25?
Yep.
Oklahoma State, that is?
Yep.
So they're still a top 25 ranked team.
Yep.
So, that's just going to help.
I think this is where that Oregon loss has started to impact that too as well.
Yep, because, that's going to really – we're going to have to see, and we'll talk more about that. But let's talk about these two meeting up this weekend. So the Big 12 championship game will be in Jerry World in Dallas or Irving.
No, it's not. I don't think –
Is it Irving?
No, I think they moved it. That was the old place.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, it's Arlington is where it's at now. It's right next to the baseball stadium.
Okay, so it is. It's a nooner on Saturday as Baylor and Oklahoma meet up for the rematch. And right now you're looking at number 6, Oklahoma versus number 7, Baylor.
Yep.
We know what happened last time.
Yep.
I think the winner of this game has a good shot to get in. It's going to be a tough decision if Utah wins for the committee.
Yep.
And that is also assuming that LSU beats Georgia.
Yep.
Because if LSU loses, I think there's going to be 2 SEC teams in. But here's a little piece for you. Need I remind you, okay, Oklahoma was down by 25, and Jalen Hurts pretty much single-handedly brought them back in that game a few weeks ago.
Yep.
What were they missing?
Who's that, Oklahoma? Who or what?
Who?
Who were they? Were they missing Lamb?
They were missing C.D. Lamb. Now, C.D. this past weekend against Okie State
Not a big
had
week.
4 receptions, 36 yards, no TDs.
Again, Jalen Hurts only threw for 160-something. So,
But understand something. He didn't have him in that first game, and I got to imagine if he did, it might not be the deficit that they had to come back from if he was there.
True.
I think that is going to be a huge difference maker, and I'll be honest, I haven't heard many people talking about that. I haven't heard many people bring up the fact that CD, who is very explosive, was not playing in that first game, yet will be in this game. I mean, I think that could be a big, big piece.
Yeah. I also, though, I will say this. This doesn't get enough play, and it's going to be at play in 2 games this week. It's very tough to beat a good team twice.
It is.
Very, very tough. You show some things out on the field. I mean, in college football, it's very rare that you get film from the same year on your opponent. That's one of the challenges of college football is you get film, but to get film against your own team. So this to me is where coaching becomes huge. And right now, as good as Lincoln Riley has been at Oklahoma, I think Matt Rule has shown more in the last couple of years. And so I think that's going to be very interesting. I agree with you, CeeDee Lamb. You cannot discount a superstar player not playing. So I think those are 2 factors. So I think this game's very going to be interesting. I think it could go either way. I really could see it go either way.
Look, if I start to try to break it down from certain, aspects of the game, certain sides of the ball, if I look at defense, I think Baylor's got a better defense than Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Straight up, I do. And if I look at offense, I wouldn't say they're too far off. I'll give a little bit of an edge.
I'd say Oklahoma's more explosive.
Yes,
offensively.
and but it's going to take if Charlie Brewer gets on his game. I think it was 2 weeks ago where they were playing. It was after the loss, and I had said we were talking about Baylor, and I was talking about Charlie Brewer, how he had pretty much put the team on his back.
Sure.
And if he does that, and he's capable of doing that, then they have a phenomenal shot at this game. I hope it's not a situation where, the experience that Oklahoma, not just Lincoln Riley, but some of those guys on the team, and Jalen Hurts, when he was at Alabama, the experience in these type of situations doesn't get too big for Baylor and that they cave. But man, I tell you, it was Texas. It was the game after Oklahoma. Baylor played Texas, and they won 24-10. And then, like I said, Brewer pretty much put the team on his back. It's going to take a good game call by Rule and his staff. Brewer definitely needs to, do that and put the team on his shoulders. But if they can run the ball too, like they've been running the ball with a good game plan, then take a little bit off of him so that he only has to, when he's called upon, make those plays.
Sure.
And we'll see. I think it's going to be a great game. I agree. It's very hard to beat the same team twice, but at the same token, for everything we saw in that first game, Oklahoma lost. They won last minute. They were losing the whole game.
Yep.
So they may go into it like, listen, we have to flip the script, and we need to be ahead.
Yep.
So we'll see. But again, that game is a nooner at Jerry World on Saturday, the Big 12 championship. So now we're going to move into the Pac-12. We're not going to talk about Oregon only because they have 2 losses and they're out of the college football playoff. But they can play spoiler.
And potentially New Year's 6.
Yeah. Now, we talked about Utah because they sat last week at 6 behind Alabama, who was at 5. Now, after yesterday's ranking, they move up into that 5 slot with Alabama's loss in the Iron Bowl. Colorado came to town. Colorado, good team. Mel Tucker's done a great job with this team this year in his first year as the head coach. Again, defensive coordinator, came from the University of Georgia. Utah just spanked them, just smacked them around. It definitely, as you start to watch this, and hopefully if you haven't, the world will see it. I think that's one of the reasons it's Friday night in prime time.
Give them a little bit extra exposure.
Yeah, because look, man, they are a complete team. They have a very good defense. Zach Moss is a very good running back. And Huntley, their quarterback, extremely efficient and doesn't make mistakes, doesn't turn the ball over.
Right.
It's hard to find a flaw in their game. Now, are they as explosive? They have some players to be explosive. Are they as explosive as maybe an Ohio State, LSU, Clemson? I don't know about that. I definitely think if they show their stripes in this game against Oregon, that they should just be in over the Big 12 because those 2 teams in the Big 12, it has been hemming and hawing here and there. Mm-hmm. They can dominate. Look, they lost that game to USC, who's also a top 25 team, on the road, and lost their running back at the beginning of the game, and it threw them for a loop. Should they have lost it? Probably not. But they did, but it wasn't a bad loss. And, when the committee looks at these things, they do take into consideration when key players like a Zach Moss is out, how that can hinder them. And they didn't lose bad. So Utah, man, Whittingham, great coach.
Phenomenal coach.
Everybody has said, Mario Cristobal at Oregon has brought that SEC mentality to that team with being tough in the trenches, being able to run the ball and play tough defense. So's Utah, quite frankly.
Yep.
They are a tough out.
Well, I remember you and I were talking about it, and I wasn't seeing the explosion out of Utah early in the season. I'm talking the first 4 games of the season. But just to give you an idea of what Utah's done, again, forget the opponent to some degree, but Oregon, since going back to mid-October, 52-7, 21-3 against Arizona State. Utah was 35-0 against California. Cal was playing some decent defense. Not a great team, but playing some decent defense. Their one close game was Utah beat Washington in Washington 33-28. 49-3, 35-7, 45-15. So you go back and you can kind of look at some of the stats and it kind of goes, I don't know how good they really are. That's smacking teams, and they're doing it with defense. And we said this a while back. While it's an offensive game a little bit more in both college and pro, defense is gonna matter. And I think that's why I look at an LSU and feel like they're vulnerable because they've shown vulnerability in defense. All of a sudden, some of these teams that really have good defenses are going to start creating some problems for some teams. And Utah is one of those teams that I think any team could overlook a little bit. Even if they get in the playoff, those other 3 teams could look at them and go, you know what, they're just not there talent-wise. I wouldn't sleep on this team.
No,
I would agree with you.
To be honest with you, if they ended up sliding into the 4 and it was Ohio State, Utah in that first game, I think that would be a really fun game to watch, man.
Yeah. Yep, I agree.
So we'll move on now to the Big Ten.
Well, would you want to talk a little bit about the actual game itself?
Oh, yes. Well, yeah, we can.
You would just some things to reiterate. We talked about the weather, number 1. That's going to come into play. I think that definitely favors Utah in this situation.
It does, but
Oregon's run the ball.
Oregon runs the football,
Yep.
man. They're not the old Oregon where they sling it around the yard all day.
Yep.
But you do have a first-round draft pick in Justin Herbert that can, wreck your day if you're not careful.
Yeah.
And Oregon's offensive line is really good. If they can establish the run game and, it'd be not good for the Pac-12 if Oregon wins as much as I've loved on Oregon all year. They really, kind of shot themselves in the foot with that loss to Arizona State on the road. But this is Utah's chance. They were preseason ranked in the AP high. Now they're sitting at the end of the year right there, kind of where they were with a shot. This is Utah and the Pac-12 chance. By no means will Oregon lay down and just give it to them, to let the Pac-12 get in. I can't see that happening. And Cristobal probably a little pissed about his loss and that they're knocked out, and all those guys. So they're coming with a chip on their shoulder because certainly nobody's even we're skipping over talking about them for the most part.
Listen, this, just like rivalry week, brings a whole new twist to everything, and nobody's safe. And as you said, all the teams that are playing this weekend that do not have college football playoff aspirations, this is their college football playoff.
Yep.
And that is a motivation that cannot be taken lightly.
Yep. This game is Friday night now at 8 p.m., so the whole world can put their eyes on these two teams. Yep. And look, if Oregon handles their business, I don't care if they win by 1 point or 100. If LSU ends up winning, I just think that they should get that spot. But with the Big 12 is positioned potentially, it could be a style points thing.
Yeah.
If Utah somehow lets down their guard, even in a win, then there's going to be questions. But if they just hold serve and do what they've been doing and win the game, I don't see how they can be left out of this thing. And I do think that this is Utah's game to lose. I do think that they should win this game. I think the flaw for Oregon, their defense has played good this year, but not every week.
Yeah, and not as of late.
Yeah,
in the last
not
half of
every
the season,
week.
they were not as strong as they were in the first half of the season.
If they're going to come, Utah's going to come out and run the ball and smack them in the mouth.
Yeah.
And
again, Utah's going to do what they do, and they've won that way. So Oregon, on the other hand,
I think
may need to reinvent itself to some degree against this team.
Yeah, I think this is a one of the great things. I mean, just the two coaches in this, Whittingham and Cristobal. Mm-hmm. What a great clash of coaches.
Yep.
And even if Oregon wins, say Oregon wins, the nation needs to not poo-poo the Pac-12 anymore. They're not awful. They're starting that rise again. And that's good for college football. Let's be honest.
Especially if a team like USC gets back to some level of national prominence. You still had teams like Arizona State. Herm's done a good job out there. Colorado saw a little bit of growth this year.
UCLA it got better.
Yep.
And the UCLA has some, out-of-conference teams in the coming years, like I think Georgia and a few other teams that it could really boost their resume and make them look good on a national stage. But
and think about it, too, this was also a conference that had a team like Stanford, who traditionally is a 9 to 10 win team, and I love their coach.
Yep.
So I think he'll right that ship in my mind. So that, again, this conference, can get a lot more going for it.
Yeah. So like I said, despite what happens, the Pac-12 moving forward in the coming year, at least in the next year, shouldn't be written off. It's a good conference, and it's definitely, in my mind, it's better certainly than the ACC was this year, and you could even say the Big 12 in my mind.
Sure.
So, all right, let's move on now to the Big 10.
Okay.
Wisconsin travels to Minnesota. Game day was there. Eric Decker, former NFL wide receiver for the New York Jets, was the celebrity picker. People were rowing the boat. P.J. Fleck was out there. Yep. There was snow. It was cold. It's not something Wisconsin's not used to. But
playing for the Axe.
Playing for the Axe, baby. Playing for Paul Bunyan's Axe and playing to get into the Big Ten championship game.
Was understand, again, this was a win and you're in after Minnesota stumbles. You had the Illinois loss for Wisconsin. That was a surprise. And then also, obviously, they had the loss to Ohio State, which was not in the end a close game, but at halftime was a 10-7 game. So, and then I think the final score was 38-7, if I remember correctly. This is a team that's been able to win a lot of games this year by running really well and by playing really tough defense. question marks at quarterback came to fruition against Illinois, and certainly they struggled when the running game got shut down against Ohio State. But this is not a joke of a team. I mean, remember, this team was a top 6-7 team through more than half the season.
Yep. Look, their quarterback, Jack Cohn, hasn't been the savior. It's been Jonathan Taylor. Now, Jonathan Taylor did have 2 TDs in this game, but he only had 18 carries for 76 yards. It's very un-Jonathan Taylor-like. Now, he did what he did when he got the ball in critical situations and really had an impact on the game. Yep. But to say that, Cohn had a really good game for all intensive purposes. 15 to 22, 280 through the air, 2 TDs, no picks. This Cephas kid, Quintez Cephas, 5 for 114, 22.8 yard average per catch and a TD. He's their explosive playmaker. Cohn found him when need be. 2 TDs through the air, no picks. Cohn even rushed the ball 3 times for 20 yards. So he stepped up. I think that was the difference in this game. He really stepped up.
He did.
And on the flip side of the ball, Morgan, I mean, he had 37 attempts, completed 20 of them for 296 yards, had 296. 2 TDs, 1 pick, but they couldn't run the ball.
Yeah.
They couldn't establish the run, and they couldn't keep their defense off the field in this game.
Well, and I think you look at it. He took 5. Wisconsin had 5 sacks in this game. Their defense, especially their front 7 and their pass rushing and run fits in this game were very, very good. That kind of waned a little bit in the maybe start of the second half of the season, and that's where they saw some of those losses. They were not as dominant. I mean, this Minnesota offense has proved that it can be explosive, and it can be explosive in cold weather and all that jazz. They know they're used to playing
the ball,
it.
they can throw the ball.
Yeah, and they really kind of shut them down. They limited their running attack. Ibrahim had a good day as far as yards per carry, but only carried the ball 5 times in this game. And other than that, they were shut down. So
I mean,
it's big.
They're a big play receiver. Made big plays, six catches for $147 in a TD. So I mean, but it just wasn't enough. Like I said, the tell of the tale is in the rushing statistics. They couldn't rush the ball.
Yep.
So, they were putting it all on Morgan and made him very one-dimensional. And don't get it twisted, Wisconsin has a good defense. I mean, they're a very solid defense.
Yeah.
And so they took care of business. Ended up going away in a big win, 38-17. Wisconsin jumps up in the recent rankings to 8. Minnesota drops to 18. Both teams 10-2. Wisconsin, a 2-loss team, going in to hopefully avenge their loss early in the year to Ohio State in this Big Ten championship game.
Yeah, I mean, understanding this, as much as Wisconsin had a couple of tough games there where they lost, they are still the number 6 in yards allowed per game and 9th in points allowed per game. Ohio State, maintains that upper echelon on both offense and defense, so that's probably going to be the swing there. But Wisconsin still scores points. The advantage really here is in the passing game, I think, for Ohio State. So it's going to be, and let's put this out here. This is very, very important. Josh Fields was injured in that game.
Justin,
what I call him, Josh. Justin Fields.
We haven't even talked about Ohio State, Michigan.
Yeah, so that's going to be an interesting little play.
Let's dive right in. Let's talk about it. The big one. Everybody's talking about, here's Harbaugh's chance. Michigan's defense has been solid for the majority of the year, sans the first couple games. Their offense has been question mark, but then the past several weeks, ever since that second half comeback where they weren't able to finish the deal against Penn State, they found something in their run game with Charbonnet. Patterson has found something in the passing game. He's got weapons at receiver.
Yep.
And so, this was the chance. Going to the big house, everybody was like, oh, it's not likely, but it's possible that Michigan could get the upset here.
Yep. Defense was playing significantly better over the last, since the Penn State game, really the second half of the Penn State game.
Not so much, my friend. Not so much.
I will say this. Early on, and I mean early, kind of really until the midway through the second quarter, it really looked like Michigan was going to be able to give them a run for their money. They were doing some things. Now, here's the thing I will tell you is Fields may be a representative for the Heisman, but this team is predicated off two players not named Fields.
Yeah.
It's Chase Young on defense, and it's Dobbins. Dobbins, for every time you stop him for 2 yards, he gets 14. I mean, this guy he has got great vision. Now, don't get me wrong, they got a phenomenal offensive line at Ohio State. But when that guy gets churning and you see it, the Buckeyes, first quarter, 14 points. Second quarter, 14 points. Third quarter, 14 points. Fourth quarter, 14 points.
I love that.
They just wear you down and do what they do.
Consistency.
And what's great about this, the biggest gift has been to Josh Fields, not because somebody's Justin. Why do I keep calling him Josh?
I don't know.
I don't know who Josh Fields is.
I don't know who
Justin Fields. Justin Fields. All right, it's like my Darno or something. I got a mental block. But so anyway, Justin Fields has been learning to play the game with the support of this running game, and he has evolved throughout this year. I've watched him. So by no means am I trying to discount what he did, but he's become a much different version of himself throughout the year, which is kind of expected as a guy finally gets his playing time. Remember, this was a guy that was brought in very sparingly at Georgia for only running plays. I mean, the kid had probably maybe 30 runs last year and only had 4 passes or something ridiculous like that. Every important situation he came into, they only ran with him. Ohio State knew there needed to be some fixes in his passing, particularly in some of his fundamentals. And I think he's kind of learned how to do that. And it's evidenced by, in this game, 14 to 25, 302 yards. I mean, so throwing for a huge clip each play, and he had 4 touchdowns.
Yep, no picks. I mean, between him and Dobbins, that they accounted for all 8 touchdowns because Dobbins was 31 for 211 and 4 TDs.
Jesus.
So, and Fields rushed the ball too, 6 for 25, not as much. Now, you mentioned he gets hurt in this game. And
you could talk a little bit about the hit.
It was ugly. His knee got bent the wrong way, folks. And every way I see it, that looks like it could be an ACL. They bring in the backup, Chuganov, for a couple plays. Yep. Fields puts this big brace on his knee, comes back in the game. Next play, rolls out to his left, throws pretty much a dime for a touchdown. What I want to say is this. Though everything we hear is that he's going to play. He's going to play.
He has come out himself and said, I'm playing.
Deshaun Watson a couple years ago tore his ACL before the South Carolina game. I don't think we were going to the playoff that year. No, we weren't. And he refused to not play in the South Carolina game. Going into the game, the ACL was torn. After the game, he didn't play in the bowl game. Cole Stout, I think, ended up playing. He went and had surgery. But he went out and played a full game going into the game with the ACL and demolished South Carolina 56-7. Okay, so you can play on it. The difference comes, as we spoke yesterday, is on those throws on the move where you may be causing yourself to turn. So on that play that he comes back in with the brace, he rolls out to his throwing arm because he throws with his right arm. He rolls left. He didn't throw it on the run to his left. If you saw, he actually was able to set his feet, turn, set, and get in a regular passing stance and chuck the ball.
Yep. So he had to the situation here is, if he's injured, even if he plays on it, he is going to have to change fundamentally the way he approaches his throws, and his runs are going to be
to his
impacted.
left, and throw without resetting his feet because he'll have too much torque on that knee. Yep. And if it is an ACL, which we don't know anything, they haven't said anything. We could be totally just speculating nonsense.
But he has a knee injury. He's admitted that it hurts him.
Yeah, I mean, look, and you and I have torn an MCL. That's a different story. It's not as severe in terms of longevity of the injury and recovery, but it hurts probably a little bit more. It's probably much tougher to play on. But an ACL is the surgery and recovery time may be much longer, but you can go if it's not completely screwed. You can still go. So the question is, what is this injury?
Yep.
Are we going to find out exactly what it is? I don't think we'll find out.
And more importantly, can he heal it enough
because
play in
he's
the
not
playoffs.
going to be able to run the ball and make cuts that he needs if there's not as many open lanes and take a hit if it's bad. I mean, it could get ugly.
Yeah.
So,
And does this allow Wisconsin to stack the box a little bit more, shut down some of the run, and create pressure on the passing downs to keep Fields moving around? So there's a lot at play with this. The hope
said
is
it
how
before.
they,
Said it before. What did you say? It's hard to beat the same team twice.
Yep.
Wisconsin's one of those teams, dude, that you don't want to fuss with, man. They may have lost bad the first time. I don't think it's going to be that score. I think it's going to be much closer than it was last time. And if there is a problem with Fields, or if he happens to re-aggravate it, I don't know what's going to happen. Yeah, it really could be an X factor. Now, this game is going to take place in Indianapolis at Lucas Oil Stadium. It'll be 8 o'clock on Saturday.
Yep.
So I'm excited. Should be a good game to watch.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, we're on to the SEC. And this weekend we had we found out it was also called the Governor's Cup for Georgia Tech, as the Bulldogs come down to Atlanta and take on the Yellow Jackets at Bobby Dodd Stadium. Look, the Yellow Jackets, they're still trying to find themselves with their new coach. Not a great year. 3-8 going into this game. The Bulldogs sitting at 4 in the rankings going into this game. Sitting at 4 in the rankings coming out of this game. 10-1 going in, 11-1 coming out. Final score 52-7, Georgia. Big things in this game. Cager wasn't there for Fromm to throw to. And as far as I understand, he won't be there this weekend for the SEC championship game. DeAndre Swift got hurt in the game.
Yeah, it was his shoulder, right?
They say he's going to go. Now, they do have Zamir White, Brian Herrion, and James Cook. And in my mind, they're the guys that are going to have to step up because, if Swift isn't 100% and something happens, that could be a problem. And then we have the fight that happens at the end of the game. Away from the play, as Fromm throws a touchdown to wide receiver Dominic Blaylock, number 8. And wide receiver Jorge Pickens, number 1, decides to get into a little fisticuffs.
He's Pickens a fight.
Other side of the field with cornerback Trey Swilling. And as a result, because it happened in the second half of the game, and he was ejected for throwing punches, he will be held out the first half against LSU in this weekend's SEC championship game. An already depleted team from the wide receiver skill position perspective, a place they've already had trouble throughout the year. They have been able to find a little life with Cager. Cager's out. And while he's been banged up and out, the other guy that's managed to step up and make plays has been Pickens.
Yep.
And there's a lot of talk about the ability of Pickens.
Again, 5-star recruit, big receiver.
And he goes and does this against the team that has nothing to play for, is not involved. There's no reason whatsoever you should do this. And don't get it twisted. I watched the play. Obviously, something was said because there wasn't anything egregious about the coverage by Swilling. And it was Pickens that started throwing the punches. I don't even know if Swilling got a punch off. When I look at it, it looks
he
like
was trying. He didn't really get much.
I don't
connected.
really. It was Pickens, and it's just
Receivers punching people in the helmet is probably one of the dumber things
man,
in
that's
sports.
stupid. You're going up against what they will need. I know they've got a good defense, but they've got to find something on offense outside of the running the football in this game because LSU might have a little bit of a tough time, but they're going to score.
Yep.
And you're putting it in a situation where maybe LSU's defense isn't so great. Maybe, certainly not the level of Georgia's defense. But look, you make any team one-dimensional, meaning stack the box because they got nothing on the outside, and you're going to have some problems.
Yeah, this is kind of the thing. So when you get into a game like this, and Clemson had a very similar scenario playing a South Carolina team with very little to lose. You got your rivalry there. Especially when the rivalry is not competitive. Your first fear.
You were blowing them
Right,
out.
right. But
I mean,
but I'm talking about coaches. Your first fear as a coach is injury. You certainly worry about that. You saw that with injuries like Justin Fields, and those kind of scenarios. Obviously, you can go back even to the Tua getting hurt a couple games ago, and it just next big thing is, does something stupid happen? And this was stupid. It's a young player. It's a freshman, not in control of his emotions. My guess is, remember something, this Swilling is, I believe, the son, right, of Pat Swilling?
Yes.
I know he's related to him. So the son of Pat
He's
Swilling.
a good player, too, actually.
Yeah, and I mean, understand something, Pat Swilling made some serious bones in the NFL. So, this kid knows about competition. He knows compete and fight. I'm sure it's kind of hereditary for him. There's probably a lot going on during the game. There may have been a little bit of frustration. Fromm had a decent game. Wasn't terribly accurate. It was under 50% passing. So there was some missed opportunities in this game along with that. And Pickens only saw the ball one time. Had 2 targets, 1 catch. It was a touchdown. It was a 41-yard touchdown, so you can see where his skills are at. But, these are the kind of things that can derail you fast.
Yep.
Georgia really, I think, especially if you were in a situation where you would have Pickens and Cager, which, we know now that's going to be an issue, really matches up against LSU in a very tough way for LSU. And to lose those advantages at a time like this for a reason like this is brutal for this team. Jake Fromm, while he has played better since the South Carolina game, has not been what we've seen in the past.
I love
in the passing
Fromm,
game.
but you're right.
And so that's this is going to play out as a much bigger loss. It makes their running game in the first half ultra critical in order to be able to control the clock and keep competitive, because that's the real problem. Is if LSU scores on you 2, maybe 3 times, and say even one of those is only a field goal, that's a lot of points to overcome for this offense. Again, LSU's defense has got problems, but it just the bad move, and this is not indicative of what we normally see out of Georgia. So I think it's not a systemic problem. It's a young kid making a really dumb mistake, and just I'll never understand in college football throwing punches at guys wearing helmets. just never understand.
Look, so Blaylock needs to step up for him, obviously. Demetrius Robertson was a big get for them as he transferred over to number 16. He hasn't done a ton this year, so he's really going to have to step up. But to your point, and this will take us right into the next game, A&M traveling to Death Valley to take on LSU at night. The bugaboo for LSU, I would say, 3 weeks ago, 2.5, 3 weeks ago, after they were ranked, number 1, was their defense getting points put on them. Their defense getting points put on them. Their defense getting points put on them. Now, since then, it was one of the narratives I was kind of hoping they wouldn't come out so early. Save that for later. But it did, and I think they listened to it because, since the Ole Miss game, they went and played Arkansas, or they had Arkansas come play them 56-20. Now, Arkansas is not very good, so 20 might be a lot. You might think, yeah, that's a lot. They scored 14 of those 20 points in the fourth quarter in comeback time. And at this point, Delpit's back healthy. They got Chase on. I think he's back healthy. A lot of those players on the defense that are playmakers for LSU are back healthy, and they're going to be playing, as healthy as they've ever been as a unit in this SEC championship game. Last weekend, they held A&M to 7. They shut Mon down. Again, they're listening to the whispers about them not being good, and understand they've got we already know Delpit's a first-round pick. They've got multiple guys on that defense. And a lot of people are like, well, then how all year, with or without him, have they let this many put? The problem is that unit has a lot of stars, and it almost reminds me more of an NFL defense. In the NFL, there is so much more individuality
Yeah, it's a matchup game.
rather than a cohesive unit. And when you find those teams that have the cohesive unit on both sides of the ball, those are the teams that are usually winning Super Bowls. That unit of these superstars like Delpit and and all they need to play together cohesively, and then they can be really dangerous for anybody.
Yep.
This is a problem for Georgia, but let's talk a little bit about A&M LSU while we're on it, okay? So, he's run away with it, and he, being Joe Burrow, the Heisman Trophy race is done, my friend. The guy, again, phenomenal day, 23 of 32, 352 yards, 3 TDs, no picks. Edwards-Helaire had an okay day running the ball, almost 5 yards a carry, 18 for 87 and a touchdown. Like I said, I forgot Jamar Chase. Yeah, he's back on offense for them too. They shut down this offense. Now, they've not been able to run the ball. A&M hasn't. We knocked out their starting running back when we played them early in the year. Their running game didn't do much. Their top runner was Isaiah Spiller, number 28, 11 carries for 66 yards and a TD. But Kellen Mond, awful. 10 for 30, 92 yards, no TDs, 3 picks. I credit that defense to that because Mond is.
I do, but this game was all about the first quarter. And this is exactly what – there's not a team in the country in my mind, and I'm including Clemson and Ohio State, that's really going to be able to recover against a team that puts 21 points up.
And the Braves just signed Cole Hamels. Sorry.
Oh, interesting. There's not a team in the country that's going to beat LSU if they score 21 points in the first quarter. Because what happened in this game was exactly what Texas A&M can have happen, and I think it's been proven with Mon. You can't get one-dimensional through the air with this team. That's not who they are. They've had struggles at running back, and they've certainly had injuries. But to let that happen, that just puts you in a terrible situation.
They've been kind of one-dimensional because of the running game falling flat.
Right, and that's where they've not been able to compete against anybody that's got a pulse. So
I actually thought this would have been a little bit closer because I figured Texas A&M, certainly a better offense than Arkansas and even Ole Miss for that matter, who was able to put 20 and 38 respectively on them.
You can't also throw 3 picks in a game either.
No, but again, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. This LSU defense that everybody's worried about is starting to get it right at the right time. And that's what's important.
One time does not make a trend with me. I'm not saying that they're not. This has been the frustrating thing with LSU's defense all year long has been you mentioned names. This is not a team void of talent. Tons of talent on this defense. Yet they've been very, very, very inconsistent. Here's the interesting part when it comes down to something like Georgia is, I got to understand, Georgia's number 2 in points allowed. They're number 4 in yards allowed per game in the country. So they are a better defense than even Auburn. Now, they don't have the front quite that Auburn has, but they're deeper and they go front to back, that defense, better than Auburn does. And so that's where I say there's that advantage that exists. They only scored 23 points against Auburn. But you bring up a point. How is a team with a ailing running back who has really not just carried the rock, but carried the offense for a majority of this season going to do if they can't score those 23 points? I don't think LSU would blow them out. But that being said, if LSU dumps 21, I think if LSU dumps 14 on them in the first quarter and Georgia can't respond,
it's going to be a long day at the office.
Yeah, it's because you don't have that recoverability that you've seen in other teams. You started to see LSU run away against Alabama, but the thing about Alabama we learned this year is that it's not their defense and this running game, even though the running game was really good with Najee Harris in that game. It was the fact that they could score points quickly. Mm-hmm. And truth be told, they shot themselves in the foot or else they could have won that game. Mm-hmm. Much like what we'll talk about in a minute.
Yes, we will.
So that to me, I see it, but I've also watched Kellen Mond, even in games that they've won and never been terribly impressed. I I will say that
This is a beatdown on Jimbo. This could be the
Yep.
worst beatdown he's had since being at A&M.
Oh yeah. Oh, I think it is. I would
50 to
venture to say.
7.
But this is the thing: is I've always said Jimbo Fisher is a good at getting a lot out of his quarterbacks. But here is something that, if you really look at it, he's not been particularly strong at, and that is recruiting the right quarterback for his system. If you really think about it, other than his 2 years with Jameis Winston, his quarterbacking decisions and who he's gotten in there have fallen flat, because you got to understand something about his offense. Jimbo Fisher runs a true pro style offense. It's a slower paced offense, and it's also predicated about making a ton of reads at the line of scrimmage. You know, there is a lot going on there. It's not the spread offense where you look at your matchups and you have a 1, maybe 2 read option. You don't cut the field in half like a lot of coaches are doing. Hell, they're doing that in the pros, which is helping a lot of these less than accurate, less quicker decision quarterbacks still be effective. And Mon's not that guy. I mean, again, I talk about what he got out of Christian Ponder. Christian Ponder, the good thing about him was he was actually a very smart quarterback, just not terribly talented. And he got a lot out of him. E.J. Manuel was really talented, but didn't have the head for that offense. Like, E.J. Manuel, I think, would have flourished in an offense much like, probably even like what Bryles would run, but like what Lamar Jackson is running, because he had some of the same issues. But he was a good runner. He was big. He was tall. He could see over the line. So you got to understand that about his offense. And so if he doesn't get the right guy at quarterback, and Jameis Winston, look, he was ultra talented. I think his downfall was not his mental makeup as far as seeing the field. It was his mental makeup as far as growing up.
Yeah,
and character. So again, if you really look at it historically, he is not. And again, I won't put Mond on him. Mond was, I believe, a recruit before him, right? Because he was only there 2 years. Mond's a junior or senior, right?
Yes.
So I guess the point is he's going to have to get that guy. And that's tough because there aren't a lot of guys out there like that. Even if I was to look at, let's take the top 5 quarterbacks in college football right now. I don't think Jalen Hurts would do well in his system. I don't even know that Tua would do well in his system. I think Burrow would, because Burrow's very smart. I think certainly Trevor Lawrence, because I think Trevor Lawrence can do well in any passing attack. But other than that, there's not a whole lot of guys I look around and see that fit him. So they paid a lot of money. And if LSU's on the rise and Alabama doesn't tumble, which I don't think anybody's expecting Alabama to tumble, it's going to be interesting. Now, we can see what happens with Auburn, but, I mean, he's got 3 brutal games every year that he's got to overcome, and I think this is kind of showing that.
Well, let's move on from A&M and talk about the matchup because, like I said, it was a shellacking of epic proportions. It did not do enough to vault them back to 1 over Ohio State after Ohio State also beat the snot out of Michigan, who was obviously ranked, and A&M wasn't. But let's talk about this SEC championship game. We've already talked about it a bit.
Should we talk about?
Let's talk the championship game and save that for after.
Okay.
So, here we go. Atlanta, much closer for Georgia, but by no means is it going to be a Georgia home game. I think the LSU fans will come out in droves. There's a lot of them
They travel well anyway, and now that they're back to the top of the mountain.
They'll be there. You said it. I don't think Georgia can afford to get down by more than 2 scores, and that could be just a touchdown and a field goal. But that is really, especially with, Georgia being depleted, like you said earlier, actually might be a pretty good shot for Georgia did they have all their weapons there and healthy. But that's not the case. Now, I've seen Jake Fromm in SEC championship games and in national championship against Alabama look unbelievable. And it's going to take that.
Yeah, Fromm's the X factor in this game in my mind.
I even with these guys back, I do think LSU's defense can be susceptible to getting points put on them. But I do think that with guys like Stingley and guys like Delpit out they can go one-on-one with these less experienced wide receivers and stack the box against this run. And that, I think, is going to be the biggest bugaboo. Can this offensive line and the run game do what they need to do to set up Jake Fromm in easier passing situations?
Yeah, and I think, something else that's kind of important for this to understand is Kirby Smart, from a defensive perspective, is about as good as they come. Now, I understand he played under Nick Saban, and Nick Saban, has a lot of run in that defense, but I think Kirby Smart has proven that he has a lot of input and a lot to do there. So I think that they can use some confusion. They can be physical on the back end, which you're going to need to be. Those receivers and their tight end for LSU, Moss and those guys, they all can body you for the ball. I think the real key to this is how they start. If Georgia can start and kind of punch them in the mouth, and I don't think Georgia needs to get a big lead. I think what Georgia needs to do is to be able to sustain drives. That, to me, is the win. You got to win the turnover battle, I think, in any game of this stature. So number one there, you got to win the turnover battle. Burrow doesn't throw a ton of interceptions, so you might get a fumble, but Hilaire has been pretty awesome. So, I think right now it comes down to, can Georgia continue to sustain drives and get points off those drives? What you can't do with the points, though, is you can't trade touchdowns for field goals. This team's too explosive, and Georgia's going to have to put them away. And by put them away means you got to play all 60 minutes, because even if you got, say, a 14-point lead against them, with about 8 or 9 minutes left in the fourth quarter, this is a team that can be beating you with 4 minutes left in the game. Like, that's how good this offense can be if it's humming. But I think you want to create some confusion for Burrow. If you can create turnovers, you're in a really good spot. There's a lot stacked up against Georgia here. I don't know that, I do think it's going to be a heavily Georgia crowd. But that being said, and it probably goes back a little bit to Hurricane Katrina, Atlanta was one of the biggest transplant spots for people from the New Orleans area. So you might be a little bit surprised by how many LSU people make it out there that may be living here in the city. So, again, I think this is going to be an interesting game. I think there is definitely a shot here for Georgia. But, again, it just comes down to, can you keep LSU's offense off the field again? I think it's not about scoring as much as it's about sustaining drives and scoring. You can't have 3 and 4 play drives, because if there's one thing LSU can do better than anyone in the country right now, it's score quickly. I don't think anybody scores as quickly as LSU, and that's just because they rely so much through the air.
Yeah, look, I mean, if for Georgia, the recipe is pretty simple in my mind, and it's the same recipe that you have when you face a high-powered offense and a quarterback like Joe Burrow. Control the game by running the football and keeping him off the field and throwing when you need to. Just control the game and don't have your defense get worn out running all over the place, because even as good as of a defense as they are, if they're having to chase all day long, you're just going to get worn the slap out.
Yep.
And fortunately for Georgia, they have that as part of their repertoire. That's what they are. They have a good offensive line. They can and run the football. So we'll see if they're able to be successful doing that.
Yep. Yeah. It is a game, I think, that has a potential to get out of hand on the LSU side. It's also a game I believe Georgia can win with the right game plan.
Yep.
But the thing with Georgia is it requires more. If I was to say facets of the game to happen, Georgia needs more things to happen. Like, for example, I think you mentioned it, Fromm has to have his best game of the year.
Yep.
I think they need to be able to sustain drives. They need to win the turnover battle. And again, this is not a team that turns the ball over a lot in LSU. So those are big things. Whereas LSU, if they do what they do offensively, it's going to be tough, because even if it's a close game, their ability to score so quickly is killer, because it means you can't face
that adversity.
You
so
can't have a poor 4 minutes against them, or they can turn it into 14 points.
It's just going to happen. I mean, they had a couple games this year, that they've had to face that adversity. So we'll see. Always the SEC championship game is a great game.
It's must-watch TV.
Yeah, it'll be fun. This one is on at 4:00 on Saturday here in Atlanta. It will be on at 4 o'clock. Now, we have one more game to talk about, and that's the Iron Bowl. But before we do want to give a quick mention to the American Athletic Conference, as Cincinnati and Memphis, who played each other last week, 2 weeks ago?
I think it was 2 weeks.
2 weeks ago. Memphis came out on top.
Yep.
This is a rematch for the AAC championship, and quite frankly, based on the rankings last night for the group of 5, it looks like whoever wins this game, even though there are App State's in there, Navy's in there are some Boise State's in there.
This will give them the power push, probably.
Whoever wins this game more than likely is gonna put themselves in a New Year's Six Bowl. So that game is on at 3:30 on Saturday as well. Cincinnati versus Memphis, and it's at Memphis. Should be an interesting one to watch. I don't know if you were gonna be able to take your eyes away once 4 o'clock hits and the SEC championship gets going. But look, they had a good game last time. These were 2 pretty good teams.
And to be said out there, there's 2 names. We'll talk a little bit more about this in another segment, but there's 2 coaching names out there too that may be some hot commodities as we get kind of through the rest of the year.
Yep. So we are going to wrap today's show talking about the Iron Bowl as Alabama travels down the way to the plains of Jordan-Hare to take on the Auburn Tigers, War Damn Eagle.
Yeah,
This was no Tua. Tua was on the sideline cheering him on. This wasn't Tua there.
But I will say this, this game just delivers so much. It's very rare that it doesn't. And you think about this, how dominant Alabama's been. But yet I go back to, I'm not sure which is crazier. The ending has to be crazier in 2013, but the game from front to back, this might be the craziest football game I have seen in a long time. And it's funny because, I'm hearing all this stuff about, they're trashing the Alabama kicker and all this stuff in this game. Think about this. The play that should drive Alabama fans nuts.
It has to. The kicker, yeah, but this has to drive you nuts.
The end of the first half.
Oh,
holy cow.
The pick 6 off of
No, the back and forth, but the field goal at the end of the half.
Oh, yeah,
Auburn,
the 1 second. The 1 second.
I'm going to say this.
Dude,
I'm not a big.
Dude, Saban was going
rightfully so. I'm going to say this.
It looked like time ran out, man.
Let me say it this way. Okay, let's forget whether time ran out. Let's say there was 1 second on the clock. Okay. Here is my thing. They have this thing in the NBA where they have a rule that if there's less than 0.3 of a second left on the clock, you cannot catch and shoot the ball because they've done enough of a study to say there's no possible way.
Right.
If you're talking about it, and I'm not big on making rules because of one play, but I've seen this happen a few times. It doesn't burn teams like this, but if you have somebody that's down with 1 second left, in essence, what the refs did by not making the call on the field is give Auburn a timeout. They were literally set up to snap the ball.
They gave him a timeout or defensive. It was like a defensive penalty. So you can't end on that. Got to have one more play. Because essentially you can't, if the clock's supposed to roll, which it should have.
Yep.
Okay.
Time would have run. They would have never got that field goal unit out.
Snap the ball because the clock would have rolled and that second was gone.
Right.
So they shouldn't have had that.
Yeah. So I think if you were going to change personnel, they should just figure you need a minimum of X seconds. Even if, you have to, because, you have to have a minimum of 4 seconds left, and 4 seconds isn't even enough. Because if you think about it, in this instance, if your offense was staying on the field and going to go up there and snap the ball, no problem, because you'd know. They'd be up there, they'd be set, they'd snap the ball. But when you're allowing a team to change personnel.
Off. You have to bring the kicker on.
That to me was one that's a real simple rule change. It's not subjective. It's just realistic. And the fact of the matter is, Alabama got screwed. They
really did. I don't agree with it.
And let me just say this: I'm not even sure there was a second left on the clock.
I don't think there was.
But even with the second left,
you can't snap.
It's not,
you can't do it.
You
can't do it because again, the ball. It wasn't like they had an incomplete pass or they went out of bounds.
No,
the clock should have still been running.
Well, the clock, it would have been reset for the
Right,
first down.
For the first down, but that's just as much as
Right,
they should have been running.
right.
There's no way they would have had enough time in 1 second to bring on a kicker, snap the ball, and get that kickoff.
Absolutely
There's no
right.
way they got effed.
And just think about that. That is the difference in the game.
It
and
is.
It's not, listen, there was way more of the game to be played, from Alabama getting the pick six to turning around and running the kickback. There was craziness everywhere.
That pick, because you saw Najee Harris, when they threw the ball to him on the little flat route, and Mac Jones, and he didn't have his back turned yet because Mac Jones was under duress and just threw the ball in his directions. And he turned around as it was already in air, and it was Najee tried to catch the ball behind his back.
Yep.
And I think about it, maybe if he didn't, maybe that pick wouldn't have happened, because that kind of popped the ball up enough for the guy to get it. Maybe if he just kept running and didn't turn around, it would have not hit the ground, or
right.
hit his leg and hit the ground. But him trying to get it or slow down, bounces off the back. The guy takes it 101, 102 yards.
Yep.
I mean, holy mackerel. How many times do plays like these happen in the Iron Bowl that it's just like, whoa, not again?
Well, Alabama was clearly struggling a little bit early on to do the dominance. That was a little bit different play. But then there was the play where Mac Jones, I think it was in the second quarter, where he sailed the ball and the Auburn guy ran it back. That was sailed. That wasn't the tip one. But then to answer that, and you're like, oh, man, Alabama's feeling it. What kick return?
Yep.
Guy takes it right down the sidelines and runs it back.
I mean, Waddle was unbelievable.
Oh, in this game. He was on fire.
Yeah, it was like an NFL, like a superstar NFL player playing against high school people.
Yeah,
I mean, he was just running at will.
And catching the ball on the sideline of the end zone and towing it in. I mean, he just did everything. And what's amazing to me is I look at this team and I go, like, in a way, I don't think I'd ever say this, but it's almost like Alabama's becoming wide receiver U. Clemson's got some stake in there, but I mean, right now with what could be, because you think about it, this is guys. They've always had that like one guy. When they had Julio, it was that one guy that was just special. Then they had Amari, and he was that one guy that was special. Now you look at it, they
Ridley.
got four guys. Ridley. Then they got four guys now. They got Judy, they got Smith, they got Ruggs, and now they got Waddle. It's just like, that's a friggin' nightmare. And I understand why people think Alabama is so good, and I think they're a very good team with Tua. I think they probably win this game with Tua. He's just not as prone to make as many mistakes, though. I think Auburn, and of all things, if someone to say to me Auburn beats Alabama, I wouldn't have been shocked in this game at all, because I know how deep-seated this rivalry is. But to win the way they won, I would have never expected the game to roll like it did.
I still will contend to you right now to this day that I believe Auburn's defensive front and defensive line in particular is the best in the country. Okay,
I think there's a lot of argument for that.
This game here, that D-line, I don't think I've seen them this year be as controlled. Alabama was able to control that D-line more than any team I've seen Auburn face this year. And that was the thing that I thought was going to screw them, but they were able to control that D-line. Najee Harris goes 27 for $146 on the ground in TD. I mean, it's just... But wacky things happen in the Iron Bowl, man.
Yeah, and I think that's the interesting thing is usually a game is decided by a big, like a turning point, something big happens. This game had 9 big things happen. It was all it was amazing plays.
Yeah.
And it just was whether
Lead
they were
changes.
catastrophic.
Somebody scores. Somebody answers.
Nobody could hold on to the momentum here. All you knew was pucker meter was at DEFCON 5 because it just crazy stuff was happening. That is probably one of the most fun football games, which I like because I didn't have a rooting interest. I mean, that's I'm sure cardiac arrests were tenfold in Alabama, the state of Alabama that day. But it was crazy the way it was played. I don't like the field goal thing, and especially since it was a 3-point game, because I think that's the one thing that really could have been avoided. Their kicker missed the field goal at the end, which wasn't an easy one, but for a college kicker, he should have hit it. Yeah.
I think that is not even the biggest bugaboo, even with with him missing it, they still had a chance. And based on what you had seen that whole game, it could only take one play. But, man, I don't know. I mean, like, however you want to call it, is it bad coaching or stupid mistake or or Gus Malzahn fooling them? And they had those 12 people on the field when they had them in third down and 4, I think it was, and really just need to make that stop to get the ball back. And that they use all their timeouts. There's a minute left, and they give them the first down because of that penalty to ice it. Wow. Like, but hey, man, we've seen a couple of these mistakes by Alabama this year. Silly mistakes,
which is not indicative of that.
No,
it's not.
I know everybody the banter is the dynasty. No. Because, look, I just saw an updated recruiting ranking for this coming year, and we've held the number 1 spot solidly and still can end up there. But I saw an updated recruiting ranking yesterday, 2 days ago. Guess who's number 1 right now?
Probably Bama.
It's Bama. So don't give me this BS. As long as Saban's there, the dynasty is not falling off. In fact, next year, with all these young players on their defense that got a little taste this year, they could be getting back to the dominant defensive ways.
We'll understand this too. There's been enough tenure of Saban to understand the guy knows how to coach, right? Knows how to get guys in the NFL. There's no like, was he a flash in the pan? There's none of that. That doesn't exist. And I think at this point, Dabo is pretty much right there in that sense. So the feeling and a thing that may have changed with Alabama that could be very interesting and not really for the rest of college football, but now there's starting to be some holes open up in Alabama where some of these superstar talented kids may not have to wait to play.
No.
Because they're seeing like great defensive players, they could come and play and they could get early PT on a Bama defense that's rebuilding himself. There's a lot here. And this is a team, think about it.
I don't know about rebuilding. I mean, it is Bama, but I agree.
No, not
with
rebuilding, but I'm just saying, but how many times would you have said, like, they put number 1 classes where you look, use Najee
They
Harris.
will again.
Najee Harris was the number 1 running back that year when he came out.
They will again.
Where was he freshman year? You didn't see him. Why? Because he had to bide his time.
Yep.
And he's proving to be every bit as good as we thought he was, but he had to wait. Like, I'm saying, even with all that, they don't have, like, some of these kids might be looking at, like, man, I can even get playing time early at Bama.
Look, here's another thing I want to say, too. I know Tua is a difference maker. This Mac Jones kid is raw. He's raw. He came in mop-up duty. He started a couple games against bad teams, but he hasn't really had a test like this on the road. And, yeah, he threw 2 picks in this game, and that's critical. But he went 26 of 39 for 335 and 4 TDs.
Yep.
He's not bad. Give this kid an offseason. Because I still think Tua's going to make his jump. Give this kid an offseason. You got the Talia Tagovailoa kid behind him. They've got a quarterback somewhere in there that they can coach up. That'll be fine.
They're 9 points away from being undefeated.
Yeah, exactly.
Or what, is it 8 points? 46 to 41.
Well, unfortunately, it does drop Bama to 10-2, and they tumble all the way out of the 5 slot to 12. Was it 12? I think it was 12.
Could be.
And Auburn, they go from 8-3 to 9-3. They move up right in front of them at like the 11th spot, I think it was. Final score 48-45 Auburn. And Alabama will not be going to the college football playoff for the first time since the college football playoff has started.
Yeah. And let me say this about Alabama. As much as I'm not sure they would have deserved to be in there, depending upon how things played out, even if they would have had one loss, they could very well be the best team not going to the playoff.
Oh, yeah.
I could admit that, not going to the playoff this year. I mean, they've played some tough games. The hard part is this is a big, you've talked about the fatigue of Clemson and Alabama that the national narrative kind of had. And we've always said, you know what? If you don't think they deserve a spot at the table every year, beat them. And that's very rare that either one of those things have happened. But the simple fact of it is, there's nothing that says that they're falling off and none of that, and there's none of that fatigue. There's nothing that says they're going to go away in my mind. I think it's good that we're seeing this because I do like the resurgence of LSU. I think LSU Alabama has, for most of my viewing years, been a hell of a thing to watch, and I would love to see it. It's one of those things where, you know, it's good to see some new blood in there, but it's good to see teams earn it against Alabama, because I don't think Alabama's terrible like that. That's why I
understand something. Like a lot of those guys, you know, they're in the SEC West. You know, you look at this Auburn team. A lot of those great players on that defense are going to the NFL next year or this year. Mm-hmm. Okay, Joe Burrow from LSU is going to the NFL, and a lot of the players on their team, Del Pitts, you know, those guys are going to go to the NFL. So, you know, they're the ones that need to worry about reloading.
Yep.
Okay?
Yep.
Alabama's going to do their thing.
Yeah, I think the one thing LSU has done for themselves this year that they have not had over, I'd say, the last 5, 6, 7 years, that even in some of their quote-unquote down years, they still had, is I think they rebuilt a wall around Louisiana. I've never I can't say there's a program out there that has controlled a state of football for as long as they have. I mean, it used to be, I remember, when we got Warwick Dunn, it was like the biggest thing in the world to get a kid out of, I think he was from Metairie, sorry. Metairie, they got him out of there, and that was a big deal. And
look, we got Etienne. He's from the town right next to Baton Rouge, and he was committed to LSU.
Those were
flipped
big
his
things.
commitment to come to Clemson, 3 years ago. That was big.
I think right now with the way LSU's going, and again, I'm not saying this is going to sustain them, but it is impressive. I think this is a point where they're rebuilding that wall, and the ATNs may not get away after this. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
All right. Well, that'll wrap up the Week 14 recap and the look at the championship games.
Yeah, we definitely did the preview of what we're going to see.
So we'll cut this up. We got some more chatter we want to talk about, the rankings. We want to talk about the coaching carousel. But as always, we'll see you next time on the gridiron. Have a great